Have you heard of the Altenew Shimmer Relief Paste? This stuff is a brand new product from Altenew, and I am going to show you 7 different ways to use it. And some of these I bet you've never tried with a paste before, and I think they're going to shock you because they're so amazing. So let me take you through the colors really quick. Make sure that if you're landing here on my channel, I'm Nikki, you hit the like and subscribe button. These shimmer pastes have so much shimmer. I'm going to try to open up each color just to get you a little bit of an idea, but they look even better in person. Now, most of these are metallics as of right now. I think that we will eventually get some other colors in the family. If you're needing to add a color, you can add to the white with some alcohol ink. My absolute favorite color is right here. Now, of course, I will list all these colors for you in the description with my links, but let me just start with the easiest way to use a paste. Probably everyone knows that you can use paste with a stencil. Now, this paste has a lot of dimension to it, and it does dry well, almost like a plastic. So I highly suggest wearing gloves with it, because if you get it on your hands, or especially if you get it on your clothes, this is not coming out. It can actually be put on fabric and stay there. So just realize that you're working with a different kind of product, and be careful and prepared. I'm actually wearing an apron, and I'm wearing gloves just to be easier on the cleanup. The other thing that I will say is to consider having some paper towels, some baby wipes, something else to wipe off stencils and everything you're applying this with pretty quickly, just to make sure that you're not it's not drying and you're not having to scrape it off. It's a lot easier to do it while it's wet than if you give it too long and it dries. So I used baby wipes, I used paper towels to get the majority of it off, and I didn't have any trouble. You'll see I'm using my Altenew sticky mat. I didn't have any trouble. I did use a baby wipe, just something wet on that mat, and I used something wet on the stencil too, just to make sure that I got all of this off. I just want y'all to be prepared ahead of time with that. Now let's look at how much 3D results this gives. It looks so beautiful. I'm going to try to show it in the light too, so you can see all of that shimmer. And it's just gorgeous. So that's our first way to use this. Our second way to use this is to make our own cardstock. So I'm just applying some paste to the top, and then I'm going to spread this along a piece of white cardstock. This is pretty opaque, so I'm just trying to get it to where you're not seeing any white, because what I would like to do is let this dry and then die cut out of it. So I'm just going to add enough to get that accomplished, and then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry. Now, if you do a thin layer, then your layers are dry, can be dry as fast as 30 minutes, which I definitely found with some of my super thin layers. When I was using it on paper, I did allow it several hours, especially since I'm using a die cut on it, because I didn't want it to stick to the die cut and cause any problems. And I believe I did 4 hours to be safe on this one, and it did great. It didn't make any impressions into this at all. It looks nice, and it all die cut perfectly. Let me just show you this hello up close. Okay, let's complete this card with technique number 3 and 4. So I have embossed a piece of colored cardstock, and now I'm going to go in and I'm going to add some silver over this nice paste. You see how much that sticks up off of my finger. So you do want to kind of dab this off so that you don't have a whole lot. Otherwise, you're just going to cover your whole piece. So I kind of dab it off to get a thin layer, and then I'm going to rub it over these embossed edges just to highlight these leaves and make them nice and silver. So just be careful with the amount that you're using. You do have to do kind of a light application. I'm barely touching this, and it's not going to cut, you're going to go off of your leaves a little bit, but I love that look. So I guess I'll call this technique the embossing folder highlight, because it's you're kind of highlighting those impressions by adding the relief paste over the top and giving it a nice shimmery finish, which who doesn't want a lot of shimmer on their cards? I love things that sparkle, and this just looks so cool to me. So we're going to do one more technique on this same background, and that will be our 4th technique. And this antique silver with this gray paper is just beautiful. You see, I kind of went off the rails just a little bit on it, but it looks beautiful. And any little bits that you mess up, this next technique is going to make it all flow together. So here's what we're going to try, and this works really well with the paste. Paste is water-based, so you can add water to it to thin it out. So I am going to add some water to my mat, and then we're going to scoop a little bit of that same silvery paste on here and thin it out, and I'm going to use it as splatters. So if you don't have any other metallics that you use as splatter, this can work for both ways. So a lot of times I'll use like a metallic watercolor, and I will say this has just as much, if not more, shimmer than the Altenew watercolor. So I think you've got lots of options, and it gives you some new metallic colors to use. Look at all that shimmer. Just beautiful. Let me show you the card that I made with it so you can see how beautiful this looks in the background. I added some of the zero waste butterflies, and I even did a little bit of shimmer paste in the middle of the butterflies so that it all coordinates. So here's our hello that we cut out of paper. We've got our beautiful background. We've got a little bit of shimmer paste in the middle of our butterflies, and I added a few pearls. So just beautiful. Now for our fifth technique, we're going to create some more 3D effects, and we're going to do it in a very simple way. So if you don't have stencils, you don't have anything else, anybody can do this. I'm taking a piece of colored cardstock, and I'm going along the edge, and I'm rubbing this, and you can do it very thin, you can do it thick. I like it to kind of stick up off the card because it will dry right there, and it makes the perfect frame. So don't overthink it, just do whatever feels natural to you. It looks really beautiful on this navy, and we are going to add it to some embossing folders. So stay tuned. Our next 2 ways of using this embossing paste are going to be things that you have not seen, and that is using embossing folders with a paste. It's something I've never tried, and I am in love. I created some really cool things, and I'm going to show you how this works. I'm going to let this gold frame dry because we are going to use this on the next card where we create more 3D elements to go on our card using only paste and embossing folders. So I'm going to be using a collection of embossing folders, and there's different techniques based on what embossing folder you're going to do. So I just can't wait for you to see this. We can do small elements, we could do large flowers, all kinds of things. So let's start with small elements. So I picked this one. It's called Petal Palooza, and it's a repeating pattern. So I decided that I would just try this out, and we're going to look at a couple of different ways to do this. Now, remember that this does form into a plastic, so we're going to be able to pull these out of here and use them like an embellishment or almost like a die cut. So what I'm doing first is I'm making sure that I have enough to fill in each of these holes. And then we're going to look at 2 different ways to remove this that I think have different options and could, depending on what kind of design you're doing or how easy you want it to be to remove, you may want to use those instead. So I'm going to do 2 different areas so that I can show you 2 different ways, and they do give a little bit different look. So for the second one, I'm thinning it out a little bit more. And the first set, I made them a little bit thicker. And there's a reason, because removing these, it makes a difference. So I'm going to add a piece of paper over the one that's a little bit thinner. Now, it's going to pick up everything on this once it dries, and this is just a scrap piece of paper, but I'm going to put it over here, hold it down, and we're going to let that dry. The other one I'm going to let dry naturally, and it still can also be removed. They give a little bit different look, and they can have they both have advantages. So I want to show you how to do that. I am going to add something heavy and let this dry. I did let mine dry for 24 hours just because it was nighttime when I was doing this. And so it ended up being, I think, almost a full 24 hours before I took it out of here. So let's start with the paper piece and see how that removes. This is like a plastic and it's kind of adhered. So you do need to kind of carefully pull it apart, but it does come out and bring all of the sections. It leaves you some background there that does have a little bit of that paint on it. I kind of like that, especially in a mixed media project. You could also go in and trim these individual elements if you wanted to, but it does clean your embossing folder really nicely, which you'll see with this other one, we will have a little bit more cleanup. So I'm going to use my tool and let me zoom in for you. And you'll see that I'm kind of going along the edges and just trying to lift it up. Where it comes outside the pattern, it's the easiest, and that is all connected. So I'm kind of starting to make everything peel up from those little light edges, and then we will slowly be able to get everything else taken care of. Plus, if you don't want the little light edges, like I said, those you're kind of pulling them away and you could trim those off, or you could do this with your little pointy tool if you want to, but eventually it all kind of starts lifting off. And I kind of like having that extra little edge because it helps you get everything lifted up without actually damaging your design. Because if you go in here too hard, you're going to mess up your design. And those little edges help you lift it up a little bit. So I definitely say being a little bit messy with it is an advantage. Now look at this. Wow, that looks amazing. And you can trim these parts off. You could just stick it on just like this. So I can pretty much pull the little light areas off. Some of the ones on the left, I will definitely have to trim if I don't want them there. But you've got lots of options for just embellishments and things in your background that you could just add this little thing to. I'm going to show you a way to use this for sentiments and how to use it as the main focal piece. So just to show you the difference, I did go in with my fine tips scissors and cut around the one that is not backed by paper. And I'm going to put it next to the one that's on paper. And I'll show you the difference in these two. Just completely different looks. And they both are really awesome and have so many possibilities. Now remember, I did a thicker coat on the one that I cut out, so it is a little bit taller than the others, but that's just because I put more on it. And if you do a whole lot thicker on the paper, sometimes you can warp the paper because this is a wet paste, so those don't stick up quite as much, but still give a really cool look. Okay, check this out with words. This is one of my favorite embossing folders. It's Ways to Thank You, and it has all these different sentiments that say thank you, basically. And I was like, what if this could be a background and you could have just a beautiful gold thank you background and then highlight it with like a word thank you. So I decided that on one side I would just spread this thinly across. And if you're doing this and you want to do the entire folder, you could definitely do that. I'm just trying it out in different areas. And I'm currently spreading it on the part where the paste is going down into the letters. So I would call that the debossed side. It's got wells that have the letters in them. So you're filling up those wells by spreading this over it, leaving some off to the sides. So it will end up, I'm going to add another coat just to make sure that I got everything really covered. But also, I started thinking about it and thought this will not come off if it's this thin of a layer. I'm going to need some more help getting it off. So I added a little bit more. Then I did the other side. Now this is where the letters are sticking up. So you'll see that I put this on a lot thicker. I am going to use two different ways to remove this like we did earlier and show you the difference in them. But this part, I want it to make sure it covers the letters and it's covering in between with a pretty good coat so that we'll be able to get it off pretty easily. Smooth it out, I did use one of these little scrapers just to make sure everything was pretty flat, but I tried to keep plenty in between the letters. Now I decided to add a piece of paper to the top. That's where those little wells are to be able to pull this out easier. And we're going to compare the two. So I'm just going to put a piece of paper here and that's going to cover this up and dry to it. So I did let this dry again for 24 hours and I put a weight on it so that it holds it down right there. So let's start with the one without the paper. I started kind of lifting it up, and look, once you get it going, it really does pull off quite easily. And this ended up shocking me at how beautiful it looked. So let me show it to you up close. This we will make a card with, but it's just a beautiful piece of gold shimmery lettering. Do you see that? Thank you for your friendship, sending heartfelt thank you. Just such a cool piece. And I was so inspired by it that I did make a card. So I'll show you the card we made. And let me show you the other side and how it comes off because it gives you a completely different look. All right, let's look at this piece. So this piece has the paper on the back, and it will take everything that I've coated here, but you've got to get it started. So sometimes you have to kind of work at that edge of the paper to get it to start lifting up. And I kind of go around the edge, just go slowly, make sure everything's coming and I'm not leaving that beautiful lettering behind. So just do it gently. And I'm going to show you. You're going to be shocked at how cool this looks too. They have kind of a different look. The white background makes this a little different color gold, and it really looks cool because the lettering on this, since we're filling in those little wells, is going to be sticking up. So the advantages of adding the paper behind it are that you pull up most everything that's there, which is kind of nice for your cleanup. The disadvantages are that it does sometimes bubble up. You can tell that this is a liquidy paste, and so sometimes the paper wants to warp a little bit. I think I will try it again with the paper and try some different types and see what happens, but I'd used the one that didn't have the paper for our next project. Now, cleaning this is pretty much scraping it. You can wet it, but I needed something to scrape off that plastic from my embossing folder. It did not ruin it or anything like that, but it does take a little bit of cleanup. So I thought this piece would look perfect on our navy sheet that we made the frame on. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to stick it down because it is delicate, but this tape runner actually worked really well. I just kind of held onto the piece and lightly put some tape on, and that worked to hold it down to my sheet of paper. So let me show you this final card. Of course, there will be pictures on social media that you can see this a little bit better. I know it's so hard to pick up the gorgeous shine and shimmer, especially along the edges of this navy as well. So let me pick it up and show you the final card. I did just put a simple thanks on the front because all of those sentiments are that way. And I added a little bit of gold twine, but look at the beautiful gold frame with all that writing. I think this would be a perfect masculine card. So easy and could really work with lots of different sentiments. So we're not finished with embossing folders. I've got one more way left, and this one I'm just going to show you how you can do really large floral designs with this paste. Then we're going to add something extra special on it, and I think that you're going to love it. It's going to be basically a 3D shimmery white piece that we're going to use almost like a die cut. So I'm using this large floral from Translucent Foliage, and this was in last month's release. It is a beautiful large flower. I'm going to do it in 2 different colors, and I'm even going to try mixing the paste to see what happens. So I'm going to show you how this turns out. You do need a lot of paste to fill this in, and I'm going to fill in the flower versus putting it on the raised up flower. So I was just curious if I put a darker color behind this white, if you would be able to see it or not. So I do put a couple of dots of the silver behind the white just to see if you can kind of mix the colors or what happens. And look at the reveal. We're going to get some gorgeous flowers. Yes, they're going to have little edges around them, but I'm going to show you a trick with that because these have a die. And yes, you can die cut this material. So look at these gorgeous flowers. Oh my goodness. So the answer to can you see the brown or the silver that I put behind them is yes, you can. But it's not real. I mean, you could try to mix some and just see if you could get some streaks, but I discovered this idea. Why not use alcohol markers? This is basically a plastic. So I started experimenting with my Copic markers to see if I could color this flower, and I'm telling you, it is the coolest thing. So let me show you. I'll finish it up. I just did 2 colors just to kind of show you that I was doing it. This is R22 and I think R29. I'll double check that in the the final part, but I want to show you how amazing this turns out. I treated my coloring like I would any other flower that I was coloring in on a stamp or anything like that, and just added a little highlights, did some lighter colors and some darker colors to give it some veining, and it turned out so amazing. Now, once I finish coloring this, I'm actually going to die cut it, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so this flower turns out beautiful. I'm going to die cut it. You'll see that it die cuts perfectly fine. And I am just amazed because this is 3D, it's shiny, it's colorable. It is just such a fun way to use a new product. So I hope that you enjoyed the 7 ways to do this. I'll show you the final product here. And then, of course, you're going to see these pop up in lots of my projects over the next couple of months, maybe even this specific flower. But I wanted to get the information out as fast as I could about this relief paste because I know you're going to be seeing it in 7 colors this month, and I am going to go ahead and say there's going to be more colors next month too. So make sure that if you are out there and you are purchasing any of this, that you use my links in the bottom just to help me out. And make sure if you haven't done it yet that you hit the like and subscribe. I hope that you get to experiment more with this and have lots of fun with this Altenew Relief Paste. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great day. I'll see you soon. Bye.